So, welcome everyone. The subject of the presentation is family history research at the National Library of Ireland, and the aim of today's presentation is to provide an overview of the Family History Service and the National Library of Ireland collections. So, a little bit of background about the National Library. The mission of the library is to collect, preserve, promote, and make accessible the documentary and intellectual record of the life of Ireland and to contribute to the provision of access to the larger universe of recorded knowledge. And the library itself was established in 1877. But what does that mean? It's quite a broad collecting remit. It means that the library collects beyond just books and reference collections. The library also collects manuscripts, special collections, photographs, and ephemera, and we will see some examples of those later in the presentation. So where do we begin with family history research, and what are the tools that are available from the library so to make it easier? The library have put together a getting started page on the family history section of the website. The library's website is www.nli.ie, and at the top you will see the family history menu. And within that there is a link to the getting started page, and the very first step that we put down on the getting started pages is to download your family history worksheets. So the library provides digital copies of these that you can download and fill in as PDF documents, and there are also hard copies of these available in English and Irish in the family history room in the library. And we encourage you to use those as your templates to begin your research and to methodically record information that you have on family. And the second step then is to talk to families. So you can use the family history charts, the worksheets, as your template. When you talk to family, fill in information that you have. And the advice that we give you is to use photographic albums. So use photographic albums as a starting point and to, I suppose, open up conversation, ask questions, key questions like how many people are there in a family, how many children do the couple have, where maybe are people buried, and so what are the grave locations. Get as much information as you can from your extended family as possible. And once you have your information on the worksheets, you'll start to see very quickly where your gaps are. So what are the gaps? And that's where we begin to think about research, where we can search for records that might fill in the gaps that allow us to go back another generation with our family tree. So the library put together a family history page that has a getting started link. There's also a link on the family history page to a section further research. That's where you should begin. When you start your research, look through the different sources that are available and familiarise yourself with the record sources listed on that page. If after that you're stuck, where do you go next? And that is where you come to contact the Family History Service, and you can send us emails at genealogy@nli.ie, and we will also provide a free consultation service in person in the library by appointment. So that's getting started. Some of you will already be there already. And what do these worksheets look like? There are two types of templates available. The first is the family group sheet, and the other is the family ancestry chart. The ancestry chart is essentially a tree diagram, and the group sheet is where you fill in more detail about an individual couple and their children in your tree. And is one of the common, I suppose, issues with family history research is that we never can complete all the information there. There will always be gaps that we don't know, and we should try and fill in as much information as possible before we go back another generation. So please don't be tempted to fill in the bare bones of the group sheet on your parents or grandparents before you go back. Make sure you filled those in before you go back to your great grandparents and fill in as much of the information in the group sheet as you basically can. It gives you the name of a couple on the sheet and their place of birth, date of birth, their marriage details if married, and then a list of the children. And there's only space for 5 children there, but you can use the sources section below that to record more children and more information. Make sure you do record where you get information from, even if it is just from family lore. So I mentioned talking to family. Make sure that if you record this information that you do mention your source, so that you do hand your notes to someone else in the family. They know, okay, this information came from grandmother and my grandmother, and she told me where they were buried, and that is the source for the information. It's an oral history source. So I mentioned at the start that we would cover an overview of what the Family History Service is at the National Library. And we do have a dedicated research room in the library. It's dedicated just to genealogy. And in that space, we have access to 10 computers for self-led research using the e-resources that the library pays for access to. So those are the subscription databases like Ancestry.com and Find My Past, and we offer access to those for free. We also have an in-person consultation service that is available by appointment. In order to access the Family History Service, you do need to apply for a library reader's ticket, and you can register for one of those online if you are new to the library. Navigate to the library's homepage and then access the section, visit menu at the top, and you will see the reader registration form, and you can fill that in online, and then you will be granted a reader's ticket when you visit the library. So you're very welcome to visit and access the Family History Service, and we're located in the main National Library building in Kildare Street in Dublin. And our contact email is listed on the slide, familyhistoryappointments@nli.ie for consultations. So what does the consultation service look like? The consultations are free, and it's a chance to speak one-on-one with a member of the library family history team. And it is also your chance to avail of advice and support in searching the digital tools. So we will demonstrate the tools using the two-way monitors, computer screens, and demonstrate how to search genealogical databases such as the e-resources. But we will also demonstrate how to search the library's catalogue and how to order collections to view them in the reading room. So if after today's presentation you still have questions, I would encourage you to book the consultation appointment. Now, the e-resources are what the library refers to as digital collections, available online, and the databases for genealogy are available on the library's website under the collections menu. So I know there are a couple of questions earlier about how do I get access to the links, the subscription links. The way to access them is to navigate to www.nli.ie, click on the collections menu, and you will see a link to the e-resources page then on that menu. If you click into the genealogy section, it will expand it, and you will see the list that is displayed on the right-hand side of the slide here. So those are the e-resources that are listed for genealogical research, including the Government of Ireland's free website for births, deaths and marriages, www.irishgenealogy.ie, and the Census of Ireland records are available from the National Archives. And the library is an affiliate member of Family Search, and we hold a subscription to Find My Past, Ancestry, and to the website Irish Ancestors. So those are just some examples of websites the library has access to. Now, the civil records, for anyone that is not familiar with civil records, these are the government registrations of births, marriages and deaths, and there are full records of those from the year 1864. So for most of us, we're able to track back our ancestry at least to 1864, and the records that are available in irishgenealogy.ie are births that are more than 100 years old. So that's births between 1864 and 1925. Marriages are those records over 75 years old, so that's 1864 to 1950. And then deaths that occurred more than 50 years ago are available online, so that's 1864 to 1975. So we're able to look and search for those on the Irish Genealogy website, and we can search by the name of our ancestor. The Irish Genealogy website also contains church records, so this is something that might confuse people as well, because they think, okay, it asks me for civil records, but it also asks me about church records. The church records that are available are older than 1864, but they're not available for every county, and they're not available for every religious denomination, and they're not available for every parish within those counties. So just be very careful. If you're searching for church records on irishgenealogy.ie, I've listed those that are available for Dublin, Cork and Kerry. They're mainly Catholic records, but there are also Church of Ireland records for Dublin, Carlow, and a small number of Presbyterian records as well. So we have some of the Dublin records, including Lucan, available from irishgenealogy.ie. So just in terms of the church records, so if we've searched irishgenealogy.ie and we've exhausted that source, we think, okay, what is the next step? I've exhausted irishgenealogy.ie. Where do I go now? The National Library of Ireland holds copies of the Catholic parish registers, so those are available online from the library's website, registers.nli.ie. So we have access to those registers from the family history menu on the library website, and that will give us access to view copies of the Catholic parish registers. However, what we need to be very careful with the church records is first of all, not all of them are available online, and there is no single website that we can refer to and say, okay, this is where you need to go. This is the silver bullet for church records. Go to Irish Ancestors or go to Find My Past. There is no single site. You do need to keep aware of the different websites for different church denominations. And the library's Family History Service will help guide you in terms of those sources of where to go for those church records. So the Irish Ancestors website, johngrenham.com, they've listed the top first, the reference tool there on that site. By county, you can browse a list of the church records that are available for those churches. And we'll cover that in some detail to demonstrate to you how you find the right denomination and the right source and the right website then to look for, or a hard copy if it's not available online. So some of the Church of Ireland records are only available in the representative church body library in Dublin. And I've listed on the slide there that Roots Ireland is another source for Presbyterian and Church of Ireland records, and that Quaker or Society of Friends records may be found in Find My Past. So that list is not meant to be exhaustive on the slide. It's just to give you an idea that, okay, some of the records are available online, but the different sites may contain different sources, and we'll go through that in the presentation now to make that clear to you. But first, before we look at the websites, think about what information you might find in a parish register. So there are baptisms, there are marriages, and some parishes kept death and burial records, but not all. So you might think you might sometimes get deaths or burials or anointments, but that's not consistent. What is consistent are the baptism and marriage registers, and the information that's contained in parish registers does vary quite a bit because they tend to be manuscript books. So they tend to be blank pages that have been filled in by hand, and that means the information can vary even from page to page within the same register. Typically, people use the baptism to try and get the date of birth of their ancestor, and they will ask how close is the date of baptism to the date of birth. That's a very difficult question to answer. But first of all, with the Catholic baptisms, they do tend to baptize within days of birth of the child. However, if they don't record the date of birth, how can you prove that? How do you know that you're looking at a baptism of a baby and not an adult? So just keep in mind with the parish register, these are church records. They're a byproduct of a religious ceremony. They're not a proof of birth. They may contain the date of birth, but it's not consistent. So there are lots of caveats with family history research. And also keep in mind that it's the child's baptismal name. It might not be the name that they go through, the name they use for the rest of their life. However, the parents' names are recorded in the Catholic parish registers. You will also find the names of the sponsors or godparents, and you might also find the address of the parents. So please do not overlook the godparents in the Catholic registers. They're very important. In marriage registers, we get similar information. The date and place of marriage seems obvious. We don't always get the address, so be careful when looking at the address. And if there is an address, it's probably just one address. So is it the groom? Is it the bride? Is it both? Are they living at the same place? Again, it's quite difficult to determine without looking at other sources, and we'll cover those later in the presentation. We might also get the names of the two witnesses at the marriage, or more details of the couple's parents. In later 19th century records onwards, there does tend to be more information. I mentioned that there are not consistent records of deaths and burials in the parish registers, but the information you find tends to be the date of death and place of burial. You might get the age at death and their last known address as well. Grave location is quite unusual to find in a burial register, except in very urban areas. In rural areas of Ireland, often the burial registers are just a list of people in the graveyard. They don't tell us where in the graveyard the person is buried. So out of those sources, the baptism and marriage are the most consistent and the most reliable records. Be very careful with death registers. And I mentioned earlier that there is no single website to search, but when we're searching for parish registers, we can use Find My Past or Ancestry or Roots Ireland. This particular example on screen is from Find My Past. And you can see down the left-hand menu, there are life events, birth, marriage and death. So this site is free to search in the library and from home. You can access this with a subscription. If you sign up for a free account, However, you are able to search the parish registers for free, and you can see those highlighted, circled in red on the slide, the parish, baptism, burials, and marriage records. So we can really narrow down our searches, and we can search within record sets using the browse button to see what records there are available. So there's lots of ways we can narrow down our searches online. One thing that I would point out with the online searches is not to ignore looking at the original source. So we can see on screen an example of a baptism in 1817 in the parish of St Mary's, Athlone, on the Westmeath side of Athlone. And we can see here the source. The source is the National Library's parish registers, and it gives us a link. It also provides us a button to press to view the original record, so we can see the transcription is different from the original record. The transcription is an interpretation of what the handwriting says, and it also gives us details, but not the full information that's in the original. So we get the name of the child baptized, the date of the baptism, but we don't have the names of the godparents. Okay, so when we view the original source, we will be able to see the names of the godparents of this child. And another important point to make with the parish registers is that often the first name is written in Latin. So we can see this example here, Edward Henson, and that the father's name as well as the mother's first names are recorded in Latin. So that's just another point to keep in mind when you're looking at the original record, is that you could be looking at the Latin version of the name. When we click to view the original record, it will bring us to a copy of the parish register. The National Library does not hold the original copies of the parish registers. The originals are held by the parishes themselves. So the books were returned to the parish after they were copied by the library. So the online version on registers.nli.ie, this is an example of Oranmore in County Galway. It's from a slightly later date to the Westmeath record. It's March 1833. And we can see that the page is divided into columns in this case. So we have the date of baptism, then we have the name of the child and the parents. And in the next column, we have the names of the sponsors or godparents. What is missing from that is the date of birth. So we don't have the date of birth in this register, but we do actually have address marked. You might be able to see that written almost in brackets on the right hand side. There's little brackets after the names of the sponsors. And these are the addresses recorded in this particular volume. So it's giving us a bit more information than is in the transcript that we saw earlier on Find My Past or similar on Ancestry.com. One of the common questions, though, that people will encounter is, where is my ancestor born? So I have their marriage and their death record, but we don't know where they are born. And that is a difficult question, again, to answer before the 1901 census, because there are very few sources that would tell us the place of birth of an individual person. And one tool we do have access to in the library is the surnames database on Irish Ancestors website. So that's www.johngrenham.com. And this site is also listed on the library's e-resources page. So if you go into www.nli.ie, click on collections, and then into e-resources, you will see Irish Ancestors, johngrenham.com listed in the e-resources page as well. And it is a very powerful website. It allows us to search by surname for more unusual names. We can also enter two surnames into the search. So if we know both the names of the two parents of an ancestor, we can see where those two names most commonly intersect. What we need to do is enter both names into the map tool to see, on the basis of probability, where is this person most likely from. It isn't foolproof, but it is a good way to focus your search and to work your way down the list methodically. And if we click into the household or household numbers, it tells us geographically how many households there are in each county. So the example on screen is of the surname Athai, and there are 9 households. So we can see little dots on the map. There's a green and blue dot over Galway Bay. And we can see there are 3 households in Mayo and 1 in Sligo, so just to the north of Galway. We can see there's a cluster there in North Mayo and in Southwest Sligo. So this particular name is quite unusual, and John Graham's website allows us to click in and see the research sources and the church records that are available for that particular area. So if we click into the civil parish map for Galway, we now see at a parish level where that name is found, and the surname Athai is quite restricted around Galway Bay, and we can see the name of the civil parish there, Ballynacorty, in County Galway. And if we click into that civil parish, we can now display the research sources for that particular area. So down the left-hand side where we click research sources, that will display the church records and census type records that might be available. And what this means is that it'll list the 1901 and 1911 census, but it will also list tax records and other census substitutes that we can use for that area. So we're really using the surname search to examine where the sources may be held on that particular geographical area. And we're thinking geographically after looking at the surname. And when we click into the research sources, we see the list of the different church records. There are dates indicated here. So I mentioned at the beginning that it may be unclear where to search for records. If we check this index list, we can now see the location of records. So we can see that the Catholic records of the National Library cover the dates 1833 to 1880 only. So that's the window of dates that you're looking at on Ancestry and Find My Past. And then below that, in the second line, we can see the same entry. So it's for church records in Oramore that are available from Family Search. And then below that, the Catholic records of Oramore available with the Roots Ireland subscription. So we can see here that the records run from 1833 to 1900. So there's an additional 20 years of records available from Roots Ireland compared to the other sources that are listed there on the page. And we can also see the Church of Ireland and the dates available for the Church of Ireland records. If it does say held by the Public Record Office in 1919, it means that those records, original records, perished in the Civil War. So it's giving us a good indication of the dates that we'll get online, and beyond those dates, we would need to contact the parish directly for access. In terms of the geographical maps from registers.nli.ie, we have access to view the Catholic parish registers and the names of the variations of the parish. And we can also access that full range of dates that is available. And from John Grenham's website, there is a link back to this page, to the National Library's registers website, where you can browse the registers in full. So if we've searched online and not found our ancestor, but we know they're from this particular area, and between those dates, we should go in and check the microfilm. It is important, as the transcription might have missed someone. We do need to go through those online registers after you've searched a genealogical database, just in case any information was missing. So I mentioned that we can also view maps, surname maps, but there are also Catholic and civil parish maps available from Irish ancestors. www.johngrenham.com. So if we click into browse, the browse menu and places, we can see that there are maps, and these allow us to overlay the civil and the Catholic parishes. So you might be saying, okay, you're talking about a lot of different types of parishes here. What's going on? The different church denominations use their own parish structures, and the government uses what is called civil parishes. So when you're looking at 19th century census substitutes, you need to understand that the Catholic parish does not necessarily directly map onto the civil parish. So the boundaries can be different, and you need to be very careful that you have your head wrapped around these maps. And overlay maps are available, as I say, from John Grenham's website, www.johngrenham.com. And we can now see two examples to clarify what we mean. And we're sticking with the Galway area here, but if we go to the west of Galway, on the left, we can see a representation of the civil parishes and their names. And on the right side are the Catholic parishes and their boundaries. These maps are derived from Samuel Lewis's Topographical Dictionary of 1837, so that the Catholic Church, as it stood just before the famine in the 1840s, the civil parishes tend to reflect the medieval structure, the parishes as used by the pre-Reformation Church, and then the Anglican Church latterly. And the names of the parishes are not always the same. So we can see down at the bottom of the map, the Aran Islands on the Catholic parish are referred to as Inishmore, and the civil parishes. And we can see the shape of the parishes are different. So Moyris, the civil parish Moyris, includes the Catholic parish of Moyris, but it also includes the Catholic parish of Roundstone. So it's very important that you do consult these maps, and that you, when you're searching for your ancestor, you think geographically. Keep in mind that the civil parish and the church parish are different, and we can use registers.nli.ie to see the boundaries of the Catholic parishes, and their maps are available and linked to from the family history page on www.nli.ie. We can also access the further research page. So if we go to www.nli.ie into family history and into further research, you will see there is information there on civil and church and census records is listed. They're listed on that page. So please spend a little bit of time exploring that. It's only really a very brief bit of information on each thematic source, but please take time and read through it before you contact us with your queries. There is a good bit of information in those in terms of the different sources and links to where you will find them. So there is a link, for example, to the religious census in there, in the census section, and we're all very interested in census records at this time of year. So moving away from the online sources to thinking about the next steps. So when we have exhausted online sources, and we do want to move on to library collections, think perhaps less like a genealogist and more like a librarian. What types of records does the National Library of Ireland hold? We hold copies of every book published in Ireland, and we hold manuscript collections, that's original sources of archives. We hold the National Photographic Archive collection, and we also hold printed copies of newspapers, journals, and other ephemera. So they're a broad range of collections and are held here and in the library. And it would perhaps be the manuscripts and special collections that you will not find elsewhere, and also the rare book collections. So we will see some examples of those shortly. But how do you access them? And this is where all the previous slides come into play, but when you're searching the library catalogue, you do need to think less about your ancestor's name and more about a keyword search geographically. So keep in mind those civil parishes and the Catholic parishes when you search. Start with a broad search. So what that means is put in a single keyword rather than a full sentence of information, and we can then search the library catalogue. And the catalogue can be searched from the library's homepage, www.nli.ie, and we can see the search bar. So we type into the search bar our keyword search, and that'll bring us to the library's catalogue. And the library does hold over 12 million items in its collections. And we can also access the catalogue directly from our web browser by typing catalogue.nli.ie, and that'll bring you directly into the library's catalogue. So I mentioned earlier that the registers.nli website, the Catholic Parish Registers website, contains the various names that a parish might be known by. And often the library catalogue will only have the spelling that is used in that document. So they will use the historical spelling. So what that means is that when you're searching the library catalogue, please be very methodical and keep a list of the different spellings that you might have for a place you're interested in. So if your ancestors are from Glanmire in County Cork, if you consult the list on loganum.ie, you will see a list of the different variations that name can be spelled when it comes to searching the library's catalogue. You need to be aware that something may be described with the historic spelling, so just keep that in mind, that you should consult a list of the historical spellings and keep those keep a list of those handy, so that when you search online databases, you can enter the historical spelling and or Irish variation of the name. So I've moved something to something a little simpler here, but if we type the name of a county, so I've typed in County Meath here into the search, we can now see the search results page on the library catalogue, and we can see there's a bar chart of the different dates of collections held by the library that reference County Meath, and we can also use the filter tools to narrow our results. So if we just put in Meath, we would have hundreds, if not thousands, of references, but all I've done is click a filter on the right hand side to click church history. So I mentioned that the parishes can change over time, and church histories are a very useful tool for us to ascertain if a parish is the earliest date that is available, or if it's because a new parish was established. So if the earliest records are from the 1830s for a particular parish, is that because that parish was essentially created in the 1830s out of an older parish? And that's where we need to consult the history of the parish to ascertain the history of it, to establish the facts of how old that parish actually is, and to determine if we should or not be looking at the neighbouring parishes for an earlier record, or is it the case that perhaps the records are lost or destroyed over time. And we can use the filter tools. One of them is subject, so I've chosen the subject church history here, and we now have 26 results for County Meath. So it's more manageable in terms of searching, but we've started with a very broad keyword search. So in terms of the published collections that you'll find in the library holds those printed parish histories that I have just mentioned, but we also hold published copies of local history journals, articles and pamphlets, and the library holds substantial newspaper collections. The example on screen is from the Irish Independent. Other common published collections that are used for family history research would be the registers of electors. Those tend to be 20th century records, and they do vary by location in terms of the dates that are available. And we also hold a series of genealogical textbooks, surname reference books, and place name and townland reference books. So just in case Log Anum has not given you enough names to work with, you will also have access to printed histories or parish lists of townlands. And those are useful when you've stumbled on a place name in a register and you think, what am I looking at here? What is this place name? And then your next step is to visit the library to look through reference books. That might give us more detail on historical place names. The published collections also include rare books, and some of the rare books that we have are what is referred to as the grand jury presentment books. The grand juries were the predecessor of the county councils. So we have the county councils established under Local Government Act 1898, and before that the grand jury is in charge of roads and bridges and local government, and those are held in the library's collections. And we also hold histories of landed estates, so where we know the name of the landlord of our ancestor in Ireland, and we want to research perhaps motivations for immigration or movement, we can look at the history of that estate to learn more about what types of landlord existed in that location, and also perhaps did they sponsor immigration, or were there evictions from the estates. It's very important to learn the local history of the area that your ancestors lived in. And I mentioned earlier that the maps on the parish register's website are from the 1837 Samuel Lewis Topographical Dictionary. This example is from the History of the Diocese of Meath, and it gives us the historical maps of the parishes in County Meath. And that is useful, as I mentioned earlier, where perhaps the boundaries have moved over time. It gives us an overview of the names of priests as well, so we may want to research the names of the priests from that parish. There's to see where is that priest active about in one area more than the other. And so the parish histories are part of the published collections in the library. It is also the case with published collections that there may be surveys of gravestones that are not available today. So it may be that historically graves were surveyed, but they're no longer legible or damaged. So we know when we visit a graveyard, it's very frustrating, but often the monuments are illegible. And to be aware that there may be published collections or histories of those graveyards in the National Library collections. An example that I've given is from Ballyknoe in County Cork, and we can see on the right hand side a page from that book, a sketch of one of the headstones in that cemetery. So the published collections are a very rich source for local history and for genealogical research. And moving beyond the published collections, so published collections, books, journals, and so on, newspapers, the next big section of records held by the library would be the manuscript collections. The manuscript collections are original archival documents that are not found in any copy elsewhere. And they're quite a varied source. So what I've done is given you some examples of different types of manuscripts that you might find in the library collections. So where the National Archives of Ireland is the official state repository for the government records, the National Library holds private collections. So the manuscripts that we hold reflect different families across Ireland. We hold large collections of the landlord's estate papers. We hold collections of private individuals, of their letter correspondence, their diaries, and so on. We also hold manuscript collections of societies, political papers, charitable organisations, and school records and institutional records as well. So in terms of the wider manuscript collections, then we also hold research notes that were made from original sources. So there are research notes from records that were lost in the Public Record Office fire. So those research collections can also be useful where a historian has studied the history of an area, collected their notes together and deposited them in the library. And finally, last but not least, the Genealogical Office pedigrees, and we will see an example of what those look like. But the genealogical office are those manuscripts of the Chief Herald of Ireland. So they contain grants of coats of arms. And because coats of arms were passed down from generation to generation, they were hereditary essentially. So they also recorded what's known as pedigrees or family trees. So what do these look like? The registered pedigrees and the genealogical office manuscripts include this example of the O'Brien of Thomond family, and we can see on the right hand side the coat of arms of the O'Briens, but on the left we can see the registered pedigree. So this particular volume of registered pedigrees is digitised, and you can view it in the library's catalogue, catalogue.nli.ie. And in that particular volume, it is a 17th century volume, but it would record the family tree all the way back to biblical times. So people will often ask, what is the oldest manuscript in the library's collection? The answer for family history is complex, but the genealogical office manuscripts are the oldest because they record events and names and dates that are older than the record themselves. So these pedigrees were written in the 17th century, but they record the names and dates of ancestors of the O'Briens back to biblical times. And so we have no other source, perhaps, to prove some of those dates. We're taking it as oral tradition that was passed down in the bardic tradition, with that many families recorded at a later date, centuries later. And these are the oldest collections in the library's holdings in terms of family history research, and the majority of them are digitised and searchable in the library's catalogue. When we think about the oldest items in the collections, they do tend to be legal transactions, and this particular example is from 1464, and it is a petition from Richard Butler to the Archbishop of Cashel regarding the appointment of the parish priest Dermot Can and Knockgraffan in County Tipperary. And this is an example of a legal deed in the library's collections so that we can see. It's a fragile original document, and it's one of the oldest records in the library. They do tend to record legal transactions such as petitions conferring legal rights. In terms of lists of names, the oldest records tend to be tax records, and this example is a 17th century tithe allotment from Dublin, and it covers Ainger Street. So at the top is a legal summary of the right to collect tax. Don't we love that? Not only are we taking your money, but we're going to tell you why. But we can see at the top, it says by the Lord Lieutenant and Council. So it's establishing the legal right upon which this tax is collected. And then we have an evaluation of the properties in Ainger Street, Dublin. And the examples there include Esquire Brooks' house, and then we have Dr. Loftus' house, Dr. George's house, and we can see the different valuations in pounds, shillings, and pence then down the right-hand side. So these are original manuscripts found in the library's collections from the 17th century. And this particular example is dated in pencil 1677. And so they do list the names of the property holders in that part of Dublin around Ainger Street. However, for most of us, we're interested in the family tree and we want to put together the dates of birth, death, and marriage. And the earliest examples that we have of parish registers would tend to be from the 18th century onwards, and the Catholic Parish Registers website does contain copies of the Wexford records from the 17th century, but there are only a small number of those for Galway as well. However, for the majority of us, parish registers begin in the late 18th century, and people will often ask what are the oldest records. It just varies by parish, but also by denomination. And the example on screen is a manuscript register of baptisms by the Reverend William Bruce, and he would have been a Presbyterian preacher. He did preach in Dublin. And the example on screen is from Lisburn in County Antrim, and is a list of the baptisms that he would have officiated. An example here is of a baptism for James Anderson from August 1782. And it states that his father is also James Anderson, and it gives us the address, Abbey Street, and his occupation, merchant. It does not give us the mother's name. And the entry below that, September the 7th, there's baptised the name Francis Moore, son to W. Moore of Sackville Lane. And again, it gives us occupation, servant, and then states the mother only being present. So the mother is present, but she is not named in the record. So there are limitations to the manuscript sources, and the information in these, it can vary. And there are entries of marriages as well in this collection of William Bruce in the library. So the history of the Presbyterian Church is complex, and the records that it survived tend to be attached to the body of the minister. So the example here is the Reverend William Bruce, and he travels around different parts of the east of Ireland, and the book goes with him. So when we're searching Presbyterian ancestors, we're not thinking about Catholic parishes or civil parishes. We need to think more about geographical locations, again, more broadly, that they may be attached to a different minister over time, and that minister can move from place to place, and the records can go with the individual. And so that is the example from the library's manuscript collections. As well as parish registers, there can also be useful genealogical information in map collections, and the library holds a large collection of the maps of the surveyor's Longfield. And these are both urban and rural collections, so people often think that maps are only useful for farms or for rural ancestors. These map surveyors are also covering urban areas as well. And this particular example is Bishop Street in Derry or Londonderry, and we can see the names of the leaseholders against each of these properties down the left-hand side in pink, and the properties in Bishop Street then behind them are the names of the workshops or occupations of these individuals that they would have held. So we can see that David Young and Thomas Patterson have a weaver's workshop. So they're presumably involved in the weaving trade. And then below that we have John Adams and John Sweeney, and they have a forge. And below that, Ferguson and McMullen have a stable. So we can see information about the occupations from the maps. With the rural-based maps, we might also see the size of holdings. So we might see how many acres an ancestor held when they were farming, and we might also see changes in tenancy, because maps are useful. Often they're annotated over time, so you might find a name scored out with another name written in, and you may be able to check a tax record and verify that the property passed hands. And that is useful information when we're tracking land ownership and occupiership over time, in conjunction with the parish registers. That will assist us in triangulating our research, and the way we do that is for looking things like evidence like occupation and the size of land holdings as well as those in adjoining areas. It is useful to see that in the absence of a census record that we need to check surviving map collections and landlords' papers as well. This particular map is undated, and that's quite common. So people ask, what is the date on this map? We don't know the date on this particular map. However, this collection dates predominantly to around the year 1800, and so from the late 18th century to the early 19th century. So these maps do predate the published Urban Survey maps. I mentioned earlier that manuscript collections also include charitable organisations and a small number of school records. One of the examples that we hold in our collections is of the Limerick Ragged School Register, and that is or was a school in Limerick City and is a very detailed register of a school in the 1860s. And we can see the example on screen that I've circled in red, one of the names of the pupils of the school. And it gives us a lot of information. It gives us not only the name of the child, but also their religious denomination of the mother and the father. And it gives us the father's address, and it gives us the father's occupation. And then on the right-hand side, it has the date that the child left the school. And I hope you can see there's an observations column there. So there's notations in there about each pupil. So it goes into some details to whether the teacher thought the character of the child was good or not. And everyone loves that about their ancestor, to know whether they were a good or bad pupil. But also of interest is the next destination of the child. So whether they went into an apprenticeship or whether they went abroad. In some cases, the fate of the child is recorded, and I'll enlarge that so we can see a little better. So this is the same page in enlargement of the Limerick Ragged School Register, and we can see the entries from the 1860s. Children have left in 1865, and the child, William Malone, is the one circled. He left the Limerick Ragged School in August 1870, And the observations column states that that his next destination was bound aboard the HMS Implacable. Great name for a ship, isn't it? But unfortunately, it says that the child's character was careless, and it says that he died of fever in Cork. So it doesn't give us the date of death, but it does give us a place to search. So we now know that after 1870, this person has died in Cork. They're not to be found in Limerick anymore. And the entries on the same page are actually what seems to be his brothers, and their fate is also recorded. So we can see in the entry below that his brother was bound as an apprentice to the father, and that his character was very good. And it says, gone to London to work in 1873. So these are really valuable entries in this particular school register. It is unusual to find these. It's not something you'll find in every school register, but it is something that is in this volume. And then the other brother, the entry below, the one circled, we can see there's a third brother underneath that then, and he was bound as an apprentice to Messrs. Lee and Son, and there's no further entry, so we don't know what happened to that child afterwards. But using the information from the school register, we can then search the civil records. So we know that the child left school in August 1870 to travel to Cork, and that the child died of fever in Cork. We searched the death register for Cork on irishgenealogy.ie, and we can now see the registration death of George Malone. And we can see that he died of typhus fever after 12 days in the Cork Fever Hospital. So it gives us the location within Cork that the death took place, and that may open up further sources for us to research. And there may be records of the Cork Fever Hospital. So we use the manuscript sources in combination with other sources then. The largest component of manuscript collections in the library are the landlord's estate papers. So these are the records of the management of estates. Most of our ancestors would have been tenants of landlords. Very unusual for an ancestor to be a landholder in the 19th century. The majority of us have ancestors that were tenant farmers or urban tenants living in towns. And the most accessible source is the landlord's estate papers, are the rent ledgers. So those are payments of rent. So we think if our ancestor left Ireland, perhaps to emigrate, or if they passed away and we have a date of death, then they should not be paying rent anymore. Okay, so we can use the landlord's estate record perhaps, again, to further research and to validate the family story. And these collections tend to be very large where they do survive. So not all of the landlord's estate collections survive in Ireland, but where they do, the collections can run into hundreds of boxes. And this is a bullet list of types of sources you will find. As I mentioned, the rent ledgers are the most accessible because they tend to be indexed by surname. So we can look at the front or the back of the volume and there'll be an A to Z listing by surname of our ancestor. And other records may require more lengthy search to search through, like letters, for example, or if there are any petitions from tenants. So our ancestors may have petitioned against eviction from their houses, and the example on screen is a report of evictions from the Aran Islands from April 1894. And so those contain the names of tenants that were evicted from those estates, and the landlord's collections might also include maps. We saw an example of Longfield maps earlier, but they can also include correspondence and property deeds, including leases. In a small number of cases, we might also get photographs. So the Clonbrock estate in Galway in the library's collections does contain photographs, but they do tend to be of the landlord themselves on the hunt or on their estate. But if your ancestor was a worker on the estate, maybe a gamekeeper or horsekeeper, they may be photographs of them in the landlord's collections, but they tend to be more of the grounds of the estate than of the tenants themselves. So this is the report from 1894 that we saw in the previous slide, and it is a list of the tenants that were evicted in the Seven Churches area of the Aran Islands. And we can see there the names of the individual tenants on the left-hand side, and then there's notations as to why they have been evicted. So we have entry 164, Barty MacDonough. He's paid nothing for 7 years. And then there are further names of people in the same household. So we have underneath John and Michael Milan. And it states that Michael Milan is a blind man living in Barty's house. So this is 1894, so it's pre-1901 census. We're getting information from this eviction report as to who is living in the house. And there may be a family tie between these individuals as well. The particular report in question here does separate out those tenants that were evicted, but it also lists those that were petitioned and allowed to return to their homes. So not all the stories are negative ones. This is an example again of landlords' collections in the National Library of Ireland. We hold the records of the Darcy family of Hyde Park. Hyde Park was an estate outside Caloocan in County Westmeath, and there are records from the 1840s of the removal of turf from the bog in Hyde Park. So we can see details of at a granular level within the estate papers of the landlord as to how much turf was used for, of course, burning of fires, and in those days essential for making food. So we have, during the famine period, a record of the ability to cut turf, and also, I suppose, the knowledge that they were being watched, and every cartload was accounted for in this particular estate. So depending on the area of research that you're interested in, there can be very detailed collections available. And in that same collection, there is a later record from 1882 of bills that were posted through the doors of the tenants to state that they were not to cut turf from the bog without special leave permission, or that they would be prosecuted. And there's a stack of these. So the presumption is that they were posted through all of the doors, and they made extra to ensure everyone received that message. On the left is an example of an ejectment decree for the non-payment of rent from 1881 from the same collection. So it's a copy of the legal papers that might have been served on a tenant after non-payment of rent. And so where papers do survive in a landlord's collection, like the Darcy collection, and there is a vast amount of information available, and it becomes a question of what are the objectives of your research. So think very carefully, what is it that I want to learn more about if there are no records before the 1840s? Can I learn more about the conditions in the 1880s in the later period? So it's important to read the catalogue descriptions of these collections. They do run into hundreds of boxes. In some cases, to understand what types of records might survive, because they're different from each collection. And with the rent books that I mentioned earlier, they do tend to be indexed. So as I said, we can look up the name of the individual MacMullen in the Gormanston estate, and we can see here payments of rent in 1791 by Mary MacMullen. And occasionally there might be notes in the margin about the fate of the person or what happened to the rent. So we can see that in 1791, it says that Mary MacMullen, now widow Nolan. So what does that mean? Does it mean that the widow Nolan took over the lease? So we need to track back that individual through the rent books and to try and establish the history of that family and that landholding. Some entries have more information than others, but this particular example gives us very little information as to the age and the details about this person other than the geographical location in which they live. So the rent books are useful, but the information on each page is different. And it's only really by consulting the special collections that we can check for additional information, like we saw in the Limerick Ragged School Register. In terms of the famine era records, we do hold records of famine relief given to tenants on Monteagle's estate in and around Shanagolden in County Limerick. And we can see the example on screen of the names of the tenants in Shanagolden. The one circled is Phil Scully. It gives us occupation, and it gives us the number of people in the household. It doesn't give us the names, so it's not the same as a census record, but it tells us there are 9 people living in Scully's house. And then it gives us a bit of information as to why the person should or should not be granted relief by their landlord. In this case, so the landlord has commissioned their agent to go out and survey the tenants and to report back who is in most need of relief. And it states that Phil Scully has little or no means and that his condition is poor. And then underneath that, it states that the loom is broken. So the man is a weaver and his loom is broken. So he has no means of income. We can see that there are entries on the page: Joseph O'Brien, shoemaker; John O'Connor, schoolmaster. And the schoolmaster's condition is noted as middling. So we're getting a bit of information as to the condition of the people during the famine years. This particular book dates to 1846, and it is available digitally in the library's catalogue. So if you do have ancestors from that part of the county around Shanagolden, do take a look in the catalogue. If you type in Monteagle or Shanagolden, you'll be able to view a copy of this and compare the population before the famine with later records, including the Griffiths valuation tax record from the 1850s. Going through this very quickly, however, the library does also hold a number of institutional records. The library holds all of the workhouse records for County Mayo, so the National Library of Ireland collections include the records of Ballina Union, the Board of Guardians responsible for poor relief in County Mayo. And you can see the example on screen that there were 312 people already in Ballina Workhouse in August of 1845. The potato blight is recorded as arriving in Ballina in September 1845. So already in the month preceding the potato blight arriving, we have over 300 persons in the workhouse in Ballina. These records are held, we hold as originals in the National Library collections. As well as special collections, the library also holds prints and drawings, and these can be useful where we're looking at perhaps the wider contexts of how people might have lived. An example on screen is the ruins of the Abbey of Multifarnham in County Westmeath, and this building has since been restored. So it's giving us a historical overview of how it might have looked at the time the print was made. And these are sources that are available within the library's collections in the print and drawings department. We also hold collections of what we refer to as ephemera, and these would include posters and bills and items that really might not otherwise have survived. So you can imagine this might have been posted up somewhere in a public space. This is an auction of a farm in Auchinmullen in County Tyrone, and we can see details of the tenancy as well. So it says that the farm is in occupation of Matthew Coney, and it gives us the details of the rent. And so the ephemera collections include the sales of farms. The final format collection type that I would like to speak about in the presentation would be the photographic collections I mentioned at the beginning of the National Library is home to the National Photographic Archive. This is a collection of over 5 million photographs held in the National Library collections in Temple Bar in Dublin. And the collections include some of the earliest Irish photography from the 1840s, but for family history research it would be the studio photographs from the later 19th century. Onwards that are useful for genealogical research. Some of the largest collections of studio photographs that we hold are the Lawrence collection and also the Poole collection. An example on screen is from the Poole collection. The Poole collection focuses mainly around County Waterford, and the names of subjects, whilst they're not specified directly, the person that commissioned a photograph is known. So we often can search within the Poole collection by surname and find results of our ancestor there. And a large volume of those are available to view digitally online on catalogue.nli.ie. If you type in Poole now into your browser, you'll find the digital copies of those photographs. And so the best way to explore the photograph collections is either on the catalogue or on the National Library's Flickr page, FLICKR. The Flickr page contains a curated collection of photographic albums, including families albums, so please take time to look at those on the library's Flickr page. And the library's photographic archives are not just 19th century collections, we also collect contemporary photographs of Ireland, and this particular example is from the 1960s, from the Richard Tilbrook collection, and it depicts a family and the Irish travelling community in County Limerick. And we have not identified this family, and we've posted it to our Flickr page to request assistance really in identifying the subjects. So you can identify those on the comments section on Flickr, as well as places that are depicted in the library's collections. The That information then is copied over to the catalogue. So what that means is that we're not saying that we've identified these people, but there's someone out there who has. And that makes it really great interface for you to explore our collections and to help us identify the subjects in them. So please take a look at the Flickr page. And I mentioned at the beginning that I would share contact details at the end, so we're not taking questions during the presentation. However, we do actively encourage you to reach out to us, to send your questions by email to genealogy@nli.ie, or to leave us a phone, or indeed to post a query to us, and our phone number and address are listed on the slide. So please do send us your queries. We're here to provide you with advice and on your research. Your research doesn't end after today. You'll all have different lines of inquiry and different questions, and we're here to provide you with advice as to the sources that might be available to further your research. And hopefully you've gained some knowledge about the variation really and the types of collections that you might find in the National Library of Ireland. Thank you for listening, and please do get in touch with us with your queries.